So I've been kicked out of the library, but in exchange, I've been given the access to this cafe next to the church. It's really, really cool. Very nice filming location. Thank you, Jesse Sharma. What I'm doing today is I'm hanging out in the library, in the cafe today, and I'm working on an assignment for SPTC. I'm just noticing that my battery's almost flat. I need to charge this. But yeah, so that's what this video is going to be about. It's going to be my preparation for an assignment for SPTC, my Bible college, and it's for a module called, so I'm struggling to take out my piece of paper, called Further Exegesis. And what I've been doing all day is been looking at this. So this is my terrible handwriting, but what it is the passage I'm going to be preparing a Bible talk on. And we're meant to write this out on a piece of paper by hand and bring it everywhere we go. So that's what I've been doing all day, at least this morning on the LRT. Just looking at this, thinking about it, internalizing it, and then doing that over and over again. And I think the idea is to do this before we hit the commentaries. Just before this, I was in the library, and before they kicked me out, Priscilla was asking me, do I need to grab some of the books to read? And the point is to do that after this, before going to the experts and looking at other people's opinions, to kind of form your own mind, come up with your own questions even from the passage. Yeah. So that's the plan. Yeah. Anyways, so looking at this passage, by the way, thank you so much to, I'm not sure whether I can see your name. Someone suggested this passage on Instagram, so I really, really appreciate that. It's from 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and it's, how do I put this? It's a very heavy, very, very heavy topic about what will happen at the end of time when Jesus returns, and especially when Jesus vanquishes and destroys all his enemies. So I'm just going to read one verse. I'm just going to read 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 24. And here it goes. Then comes the end when he delivers the kingdom to God the Father. So there's one thing that Jesus is going to do. He is talking about Jesus. Jesus is going to deliver the kingdom to God the Father. But after destroying every rule and every authority and power. So there are two movements here. Well, three, so three. So number one, there's the end. There is the delivering of the kingdom to the Father. And then there is the destroying of all rule and authority and power, all his enemies. And again, this is first impressions. Please forgive me if this isn't well formed. But the kind of questions I have in my mind is, I guess it answers the question rather, what will happen at the end of time? Because it says, then comes the end. And so there's this kind of preparation process. Are you ready for this to happen? This is going to happen at the end of time. Jesus is going to be there. He is going to deliver the kingdom to God the Father. So it's an act of submission, I guess. He is giving this kingdom to God. God is ultimately the king, but Jesus is the one who receives this glory, receives this kingdom, and then passes it up to the Father. So it's an act of submission and acknowledgement of God as God. So that's one thing. And the other thing, which is also very interesting, is him destroying all his enemies. And his enemies are described as every rule and authority and power. So if you just heard that phrase, you'd think, governments, every role, every authority, you'd think very famous, very wealthy people, every power, that kind of thing. And I think this is in, what's the word for it? In contrast, I guess, to the kingdom. So Jesus gives the kingdom, but there are all these other kingdoms that are set up against God. And so what Jesus does before the end, before he gives the kingdom, before everything is done, is that he has to kind of like put down all the other imitations of God's kingdom by destroying them. It's a conflict. And I guess that's kind of like the context to this whole passage. There's going to be a war. There's going to be this conflict. There's going to be a lot more trouble before there's this peace and prosperity and this goodness at the end of time. That is, this time that we're living in now, until Jesus returns, is going to be marked by Jesus destroying all the idols and all the imitation kingdoms and all these powers that have set themselves up against God. Yeah, I think that's a lot already. The next thing that I want to think about is maybe just the application for this. How would this apply to someone who's listening to this for the first time? Imagine preaching this in church, and it's kind of like heavy. It's kind of really serious topic. I guess you can imagine two different kinds of people in church listening to this. One person might be very, very comfortable. And when they think of God, they think of peace, they think of prosperity, they think of, healthiness, they think of blessing, that kind of thing. I think what it's saying is that will happen after this conflict. Yes, Jesus will receive this kingdom, he'll give it to the Father, and there'll be that time of peace then. But until then, there's going to be conflict. And so I think it says to that kind of person who's longing for that peace, that kind of goodness again, to maybe not be too comfortable. So that's one type of audience. But the other kind of person who might be listening to this might be going through a really tough time. Might be suffering, might even be in a war, whether physically or kind of like bombshells all around him, or maybe internally kind of conflict with relationships. And I think hearing this kind of like end to that conflict, that end to that kind of war, is really, really good news, because it's essentially promising that everything, every conflict, every opposition to God, every kind of rebellion, every kind of sin will be destroyed by Jesus in the end. And what I think it says to that kind of person who's holding on, it's saying that keep holding on, wait for it, it's going to happen. And you're waiting for the right thing. Wait for Jesus, because he is the one who's going to destroy all these forces of evil, but also he's the one who's going to deliver up the kingdom, meaning he's going to deliver you up to God. And then, that peace and that goodness and that kind of stability and that kind of relationship with God, then that will happen. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. It's a really nice place. I'm just conscious whether I'm disturbing anyone else who's working, some people working in the other tables, but nice lighting, air conditioning. Yeah, very, very cool. I'll be here the rest of the day. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for listening. This has been the Daily Bible, let's call it the preaching show, Daily Bible Preaching Show, first episode on 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 24 to 28. Creaky table.